Today I'm back to show you how we make raisin rolls. I grew up in Germany, and in Germany raisin rolls are extremely popular, so they bring back childhood memories, and I wanted to show you today how I make them. And so let's get into the ingredients. So before we get to the dough, I have prepared here the raisins, so that's 50 grams of raisins, and I will mix in a half tablespoon of brown rum. You can also use some water for it, whatever your preference is. They just need to be soaked a little bit because that will help to avoid any dark raisins at the top of the rolls or on the side of it. And it just makes them a little smoother in that regard. So let's prepare them first. We'll put them aside because we add them at the end to the dough. So we're getting to the dough now. I have 300 grams of All Purpose Unbleached Flour in my KitchenAid already. I'm adding the salt to it. So I have 3 grams of salt. And then I have prepared here 135 grams of milk, whatever your preference is, non-fat. I use 2% today. So we're adding the 6 grams of yeast. As you maybe know from my other recipes, I usually use much less yeast than that, but here it's a fairly heavy dough because we'll be adding butter to it as well and eggs. So it's a heavier dough, so it needs a little bit more yeast. To make it a little easier, for the yeast here, we'll add a little bit of the sugar mix. So here on the sugar side, I used a total of 30 grams of sugar, and I have 20 grams of normal sugar and 10 grams of vanilla sugar. I'll get to that in a moment. So let's just add a little bit of sugar. The rest we put with our flour mix into the KitchenAid. And let's mix that up. And then I'll tell you a little bit more about my way, how I make my own vanilla sugar. In Europe, vanilla sugar is extremely popular. But since we're baking here in the US, you have some options on it. You can use just your normal way of sugar and add vanilla extract to it. Definitely works. I have done that numerous times and it's just easy and convenient. Or if you bake a lot, you might have, I'll show you that now. So that's just the milk, yeast, and a little bit of sugar mixture. Let's put that to the side. So here you take a look. That's my jar of vanilla sugar. So every time I bake and I use real vanilla beans, I kind of scratch out the beans and use the leftover and put them in a bowl and keep filling up that bowl with sugar. And as you seal it, next time you bake, you have nice vanilla sugar, a very easy way to prepare it. So here we have now the flour, salt, and sugar in it. We'll be adding 1 egg. I use the extra large egg. So 1 egg. And we'll have here the 40 grams of butter. We add that later on. So just leave it as on the side so that's a little softer, but do not melt it. So here's my milk, sugar, and yeast mixture. We add that to the KitchenAid now. And let the KitchenAid knit that for roughly 5 to 8 minutes. So we'll let the KitchenAid do the job. You can as well knit it by hand, but I have the KitchenAid and it's just an easy way to do that. So as I said, 5 to 8 minutes. Then I'll be back at that time and we will be adding the butter at the end. So we'll let that do its job and I'll see you momentarily. So our dough has been knitting now for roughly 6 minutes. So I feel like that's enough, so I'll stop it right now. We'll be adding the butter next. Let me just get it down a little bit first. So you can tell it's a heavier dough than my regular bread dough. You know, with the sugar, egg in it. And now we'll be adding the butter. So I mentioned earlier 40 grams of butter at room temperature. So we'll put them in. Let's not melt it because otherwise the dough gets too much temperature and it gets too warm. So we don't really warm it up much more than needed. So we'll let that work in a little bit. I would think maybe it takes a couple minutes max. And then we'll be back and putting it on the counter to work the raisins in. So we're back now. The butter is worked into the dough. So I stopped the KitchenAid here already. So we can see it's nice and shiny. Let me take the bowl off here. Let me move the KitchenAid aside for a moment so it's out of our way. So here's our dough. I'll put the dough on the kitchen counter now and work in the raisins. So we'll sprinkle some flour on it, not too much, just so we have a nice smooth surface. The dough itself turned out really nice. So feels definitely different than a bread dough. So if you're baking a lot of breads, this is greasier because with the extra butter added to it. So what we'll do for right now, we'll just flatten it up, flatten it, turn it around. Oh, it feels very good. And we'll be adding the raisins and work the raisins in. So if you have any leftover rum or water from the soaking, let's not add additional moisture in. Try to avoid if possible. And now we'll work that in. So we'll take a moment until we have them all worked into the dough. I do the same technique as I do all the time. I'll try to stretch it and fold it to the center. I get this nicely in there, but you maybe have to use your hands a little bit to get the raisins worked in there. Let me make them a little wet. There we go. And it doesn't hurt because obviously it's a knitted dough, so it does not hurt if we're adding, additional, knitting to it right now. It's definitely a much stickier dough, but that's okay because we want to get some really nice smooth rolls later on. And as it rests and as we work in a little bit more flour, it will just be absolutely perfect. Just add a little more. Here we go. Oh yeah. Great. So, get this around one more time. And you can see I have made a nice, almost a bread shape right now. But it will go through the rising process next. So I have prepared a plastic bowl and oiled it so that the dough doesn't stick in there. We'll be adding our dough in here. And ideally, if you have a plastic bowl with a lid, that would be perfect, or just wrap it with saran wrap so that the dough does not dry out. So I'll be putting the lid on and we'll let the dough rest roughly an hour. If it's a little bit longer, that's fine too. What we want to get as a result is we want to have the dough double of size. So you have to play a little bit with the temperature in your house, in your environment, and see how it does. But I would think an hour to 2 hours will be fine. So I'll see you shortly again. So we're back now. My dough was rising for an hour and 15 minutes. It has been in this lidded container, which I want to describe it that my lid popped twice. So when it pops, it kind of literally opens. What I do at that point, I push it back down and close it again and let the air out. But so it did this twice. Take a look here. It turned out really nice. So it definitely doubled in size. So what we'll be doing next is we will be forming the rolls. So I'll show you how, for the first time I'll weigh the dough with you so you get an idea how I do that. And in the future, you know how many rolls you're making out of that recipe, and then you can go from there. So let's see, I'll try to move it a little bit for you that you can see my scale a little bit. Okay, so we have it set to 0 for now. I'll just, it goes out really nice since we oiled the container. So we'll take a look here, and we have 610 grams. So we'll be making 6 rolls at 100 grams roughly each. And then we'll foam them and we'll bake them from there. So we'll put the scale aside. We'll need that in a moment again. But for right now, we'll take the dough out. We'll put just a little bit of flour on there. We will not need much really. And we'll form a kind of roll because that's easier to portion it into 6 equal sizes. And therefore we'll need the scale here. We'll set it to 0. Let me get my bench knife. So let's see, we'll make it in the middle in half. And then each side should roughly make 3. Let's see how good I'm doing that. 120 grams, that's a little bit too much. There we go, number 1. And so we'll make number 2. And it's kind of important, that's why I like to weigh it a little bit, that they are equal size-wise. Otherwise your baking might be, they are not baking evenly at that point. So we have 3 more to go. Okay, almost. Need a little extra. There we go. $100 in our last one. 99. Perfect. Good. We'll put the scale aside and I'll show you how I form the rolls now. I don't need that anymore. So very similar, to any other rolls that you maybe have baked before. Maybe it's your first time, but I'll show you. So we'll move them a little bit out of our way. So I kind of like to do this almost like fold and stretch and push it to the center and go around in a circle to get a roll formed. Almost like this. It's a little bit challenging is keeping the raisins in there, so you maybe have to push it down at some spots again. And you see here already the dough is coming up very nicely again. So we'll turn that around and keep forming it. I like to do that a little bit with my hands. You see here, everybody has their own techniques, but I like to use the sides or the palms of my hand here and keep forming it to little rolls. So number 1 is done, and I'll show you here. We'll do it like that. That might be better, and we'll put the finished ones here. So next one, keep going around in a circle, putting it back into the center until we have an equal formed roll. Push down the raisins. And number 2 is done. See here, and it comes already nicely up here again. And I will turn it around, making it a nice roll. I'll put them here in the middle so you can see them. And we'll let them rise for another 30 minutes. And I'll cover them with a towel for now. In the interim, we'll be heating up our oven to 350 Fahrenheit, no convection please. And I put a heat resistant, very important, I had my experience there before, but I'll put a heat resistant container in the bottom filled with hot water. So we're getting some steam later on for the rolls to rise nicely. So I'll do that in the interim, 350, and we'll be back in 30 minutes again. So our raisin rolls have now been formed and raised for another 30 minutes roughly. We'll take a look and a peek. Wow, look, they turned out really nice. So I'm preparing the egg wash now with you together. So I use 1 egg, a little bit of milk, and you can now use either a whisker or you can use a fork, or if you have something like this, you know, use the little blender. It's just super easy and it makes a real nice smooth egg wash. I never believed that either, because I kind of used all the time a fork or a little whisker. But since I have, you know, had that small appliances in the household for a long time, I saw that somewhere and then it just blends so nicely. So here are our raisin rolls. We'll move them a little to the center so you can see. So I'll be putting the egg wash on them so they get a nice shine and a little bit of color when they are baked. And you can see when you use the little blender, it seems to be making it smoother than I have seen it when I just use a fork or a whisker. But you know, if you don't have one, don't buy one, just use the other utensils and blend it nicely, you'll be fine. So, let's cover them nicely so they get a nice shine and a little bit of color there. And as I had mentioned before, I have been preheating the oven at 350, no convection. And I have been putting a dish, heat resistant dish at the bottom. I like to use the aluminum foil version since I had some issues before with one shattering. So I put the water in there so we just get a little bit of steam in there so they can get that final nice rise. So that's it. So I'll be putting those in the oven now for roughly 18 to 20 minutes, and then I'll show you the final results. So we're now 10 minutes into it. I had set the timer at 18 minutes. As you can see, 350 Fahrenheit, and I want to show you how nicely they are rising. Let me step back a little bit. Take a peek here. Here are our 6 raisin rolls, very nicely and fluffy. And you see below here my aluminum foil dish with the hot water in it. So we'll give it another 10 minutes, 8 minutes right now. Maybe it needs a couple more minutes and I'll show you the final results. So we're back now. They have been 19 minutes in the oven. Take a look how nice golden brown they turned out. Look here how nice and crispy they are. So we'll be putting them on a cooling rack for a little bit, and I most likely cannot wait, you know, to open one and show you in a moment. But you know, I will not wait until they're completely cold. They taste delicious with a cup of coffee, you know, as I mentioned earlier, with maybe some pumpkin spice coffee, while they're still a little bit warm, but right now they are far too hot. So here are our 6 raisin rolls, and we'll be back shortly when I break open one so you get a good idea how nice they look inside. See you in a moment. So I am back with the final result here. You know, you had seen the finished product, so I kind of prepared it for our little coffee session in a moment. So very popular is that you eat them with butter or some jelly, whatever your preference is. You know, they're a little bit on the sweet side, but you know, as you remember, we didn't add so much sugar to it. So they will taste fine with some jelly, or if you like honey on it. So we'll take a look into one right now. So here you see, you know, that's kind of, if you look at it in relation to my hands, a nice size for a roll. So I'll open it now and you'll see how nice and fluffy it is inside. It has a beautiful color because we added the butter and the sugar to it. and you know, and the egg, obviously, you know, the yellow maybe comes a little bit from the egg as well. So take a look here, and I'll try. I'm sure it's delicious. You will enjoy it. So if you like my YouTube today, please show me with hit our like button. And if you want to keep posted on future updates, hit our subscribe button. And I'm looking forward to seeing you in one of my future videos again.